Hut 8. So
Strong
I think
time. Let's
all
go.
of us are slightly biased because all of us have at least some shares of Hut 8, um, among other miners as well. But the BTC mining space is a very cutthroat business sometimes. And Hut 8's one of the, I think they're one of the biggest Bitcoin mining companies out there. They just had a short attack, meaning that there was another company called J Capital, which put out this short report on how Hut 8, they did this merger with this other company called USBTC. And the short report mainly, I think, focused on USBTC and basically accused the insiders of orchestrating pump and dumps and saying how the insiders of USBTC were just like really sketchy, and there were like undisclosed shareholder interests, just a bunch of accusations. The report is long, and I did not read it word for word, but I did kind of skim through it. But yeah, this report kind of scared a lot of people, and as a result, the day that the short report came out, I think it was last Thursday, this stock dropped over 20%, 23%. Granted, it was on a day where I think all the miners were dropping, but Hut 8 in particular was hit hard because they had this short report plus the general negative sentiment around Bitcoin miners after the ETF approval, which caused Bitcoin to kind of drop because people kind of viewed it as a sell the news event. But yeah, I mean, in particular, this kind of news is concerning, especially because Hut 8 has not, as of recording this video, published a response to this short report yet. So people are kind of speculating. So I was just wondering, did you guys read the short report, at least skim through it? And if you did, do you find it to be valid, or are you concerned? Or do you think this is just, kind of a short attack with no basis and you're buying more shares, or kind of what are your thoughts? And by the way, none of this is financial advice, just a disclaimer. So please do your own research and do not use anything that you hear on this podcast as investment advice. We're not telling you to buy or sell anything. We're not telling you to like hold it, even like we're not telling you any financial advice. So this is just purely our opinions. But yeah, anyways, as Hut 8 shareholders, are you guys concerned? What do you guys think about the short report?
Can I chime in first?
Yes.
To be frank, I didn't read it, but I do have common sense. Let me keep going.
Too long, didn't read.
Did not look at it at all.
That's the best way to deal with investor
Not even gonna hide
short
it.
reports. You just don't read the report.
But like, think about it for a sec. Even if I didn't read it, I'm just gonna use like straight up common sense here. So right now, interest rates are all-time highs. Obviously, it's really, really expensive to borrow money. But in the case that JPAL eventually lowers it, whether it be in the summer or fall, money is going to be a lot cheaper to borrow. And if that's the case, I guess there's a lot of people who are pro Bitcoin, and inevitably they'll buy more Bitcoin. It could be used as a currency to transact, or people just want to use it as an asset to increase the amount of money that they have. 100%. I'm sure people will continue to buy or mine Bitcoin in the future. So with that being said, I think in the long term, just continue to buy it, dollar cost average into Bitcoin, Ethereum. Not financial advice, but something I would do, no more than 5%. I'm very pro miner too, because if they're correlated to Bitcoin, eventually in like 5 years, Bitcoin will drastically grow. So it's better to be a part of it instead of not being a part of it at all. So
Tristan, before you go, let me just present a potential rebuttal that some people might have against what Dom just said, right? So the kind of concern here is that, like, yes, I think we're all pretty convinced that Bitcoin will go up over the long term. Maybe some of our audience members aren't, but that's a topic for another day. But let's just say you're bullish on Bitcoin. You can be bullish on Bitcoin, but bearish on a particular Bitcoin miner too, because the catch is that, yes, Bitcoin will go up, but if you're not kind of operating a good business as a miner, the miner might still go bankrupt and you might still lose money, right? So I think this is what people are concerned about with this short attack on HUD 8 is that like if HUD 8 goes bankrupt because of like concerns around insider trading and all this stuff that they're being accused of, then if you're a HUD 8 shareholder, then you would still lose money even though that Bitcoin itself goes up, right? So it's kind of like with investing in a miner, you're taking on counterparty risk as opposed to Bitcoin, where I mean, like if you're holding Bitcoin with self custody, then you don't take on counterparty risk, right? But yeah, like what do you think of that, Dom? Like, do you think that like HUD 8 in particular, do you have concerns over, or do you just kind of not care and just close your eyes and just buy?
To be honest, it's more of the second one. I don't have more than 5% of my total
Hmm.
net worth inside of HUD 8 particularly.
Mhm.
I think you're losing a lot of opportunity if you don't just YOLO, especially since we're all in our 20s. You may as well just put some part of your money inside HUD 8. And if the worst of the worst happens, let's say they go bankrupt and then the stock goes to zero, okay, I'll lose like less than 5% of my net portfolio. And I'm not going to cry about it because I was willing to lose it. So I think it's fine. But on the flip side, if it does really well, then sweet deal. It does well. So that's my
Fair
stance on
enough,
it.
fair enough. So you're just kind of like taking a small speculative position and you're okay, like even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, because like I'm willing to lose this money. I think it's fine. I'm not saying I
Mhm.
have a lot of FU money, but I think this is money I'm really willing to risk, so to speak. So
Right.
it's fine.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah.
Tristan, what are your thoughts? Because I think you have a slightly bigger position in HUD 8
Don't
compared
forget
to
YouTube.
Dom.
Just a little bit. Well, I must confess, I did look at the document. I'm not sure you know, consumed every bit of the data, but I also looked at the pre-merger documents for USBTC when HUD 8 and USBTC were announcing the merger, and I'll say that I sold my position prior to the merger because I didn't like USBTC's numbers. Well, I think the difference is now is that post the merger, um, HUD 8 has already been brutalized in terms of stock price at this point. So it's difficult for me to see a situation in which they don't perform better than they currently have been because of the fact that um, they have such a large hodl of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and the company itself is being valued very minimalist, very like minimally compared to the compared if you take the into account their hodl, which
Yeah, the
means that
price to book is what you're
yeah,
hinting at, right?
yeah. So to me, it looks like I'm. I mean, I could see the stock price being considered inflated, when it was at $28. But when it was at like 11 or 12, I think when they posted the report, um,
You're talking the Canadian dollar version,
sorry,
right?
the
So,
Canadian dollar version. Yes,
yeah,
I always think of the Canadian dollar version.
right.
But when they were at that price range for the Canadian dollar version, I'm looking at it going, how much further can this fall? like,
I remember that. Yeah.
I'm like looking at it, I'm like, you're saying it's gonna be, they're saying stuff like it's gonna be a pump and dump and that they acquired a lot of debt, which they did. But I'm looking at it going, okay, they have enough to cover the debt. And in terms of hash rate, they're at a similar number to Bitfarms, and maybe they'll dilute. All the miners seem to be looking like they might dilute. So I'm not really seeing the real the issue that they're announcing like a flaming, shooting like a flaming gun or whatever, a smoking gun. I'm just not quite seeing.
Yeah, like you're not seeing like one particular thing that is like a death knell for the entire company immediately.
Yeah, because like to me, you know, Hut 8 is like a $400 million stock with a $600 million or $500 million Canadian, sorry to be clear, Canadian, $500 million hodl. Well, their hodl's still worth $500 million. The stock is worth 400. The Hut 8 itself without USBTC. So USBTC can't be like, I don't think it's worth zero. So
yeah, just to clarify for our audience, the HODL is their Bitcoin that they're holding on their balance sheet, and I think the latest data that we got was just under 9,200, so 9,200 Bitcoin that they're holding right now. So that is quite substantial, considering that Bitcoin is at around 41,000 or just over 41,000 US dollars per Bitcoin at the time that we're recording this. So yeah. So I think maybe now's a good time for me to say my opinion, and I just want to say I agree with pretty much everything you said there, Tristan. And another thing that I want to point maybe our attention to is kind of maybe the motivation of J Capital, right? So we've had a bunch of short reports from them already, and I think they went after Marathon in the past, accusing Marathon Digital, which is another Bitcoin miner, of shady practices, and Marathon stock has done nothing but go up since they put up that short report, although it did go down immediately after they put out that short report, right? So this is what I'm saying, where the credibility of these short sellers is very questionable, because they even admit themselves, like, hey, we shorted the stock, we have a short bias, and we will make money if the stock goes down. And they did make money, right? Because they put out this short report, the stock goes down 23%, I think it was, on the day. They made a bunch of money immediately, right? So it's kind of like it's kind of like a cheat code, right? Where, like, if you're a short seller, you just put out this short report. And honestly, like, I didn't read the short report word for word, but I think the short report could have been a lot shorter than what they put out, because, like, no pun intended, but like, they put out like a 40 something page short report when it could have literally been 4 pages, because I think at one point they went through like 2 full pages talking about how, like, USBTC hired a 13-year-old as a chief meme officer, and that's like how
Did you say meme officer?
Yeah, like, well, you didn't read the report, right?
No, I didn't. Oh, my bad.
So they put out a 2-page or 2 pages out of the 40 something page report was about this 13-year-old kid who was hired by USBTC, apparently, allegedly. This is all allegations, and none of this is proven, by the way. But the allegations are that USBTC hired this 13-year-old kid to be the chief meme officer of the company, and how this was evidence that the management is completely not serious and completely just sketchy and scammy, that they would hire a 13-year-old. So I think maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, but even if it did happen, like, I think everybody kind of knows that this would be kind of like a joke, right? Like, I don't think the management was really expecting the 13-year-old to really do anything substantial for the company. Maybe they just paid him, like, minimum wage, like $10 an hour, and it's like, here, make some memes that we'll post on our social media accounts. Like, I don't really see anything wrong with that, right? And they spent like 2 whole pages talking about that, which I think is just kind of grasping at straws. And I also think that, like, okay, even if what they said about, like, USBTC is true, after the merger, a lot of the, like, senior management came from the old Hut, and like the CEO and the chief investor relations officer, the CEO, Jamie Leverton, and Sue Innes, they're still kind of the ones at the helm, and they came from old Hut and not from USBTC. So I think this report, although, like, there are some things that might be slightly concerning, I'm not seeing, like, anything that would cause the company to, like, go bankrupt immediately or anything like that, right? So, and I think that it was overdone, that they went down 23% on a day when other miners went down less than 10%, just because of this report. So, anyways, that's my opinion. Again, not financial advice, but I did add slightly to my HUT 8 position on the day that this report came out. And I'm not gonna like, bet the farm on it or anything, but I think that um, on the rebound, once the sentiment in Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners kind of reverses, which I think it will, then I think HUD 8 will be valued a little bit more highly because they came from a lower spot in the beginning, right? And again, they still have their 9200 BTC HODL. And actually, one last thing before I pass it back to you guys. I think at one point on the report they mentioned that um, HUD 8 is not going to be profitable mining Bitcoin until Bitcoin hits 60 some odd $1,000 per coin, which I'm not sure where they pulled that number from, because sounds like they just made that up because they said according to our analysis, but their analysis was just like, look, HUD 8 is one of the least efficient miners in terms of BTC mined per hash, which is true. But I would argue that was because they were focusing on the merger and they weren't focusing on optimizing their business operations while they were trying to get the merger done. But even if that's true, I don't think that like that number just sounds wrong to me. I don't know where they came up with the analysis that they're not going to be profitable until Bitcoin hits 60K. But I've seen miners put out their, I haven't seen one for HUT, but I've seen other miners put out their like profitability per Bitcoin, and miners that are only slightly more efficient than HUD 8 are saying that their break even is around 20,000 or 21,000. So if HUD 8 is slightly less efficient, let's say their break even is around 25 or 30,000, that still makes them profitable at today's prices of Bitcoin of around 41,000. So, that's just that number just seemed wrong where they said 60K, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me pass it to you guys now.
I don't know. I'm pretty speechless about it. You can go.
I just want to say that I'm pretty sure TerraWolf has, for example, has put out its numbers for how efficient it is, and it is according to their numbers, aka Jake Capital's numbers. It is at like 65, whatever that means, 65 on there. Maybe like 67 is the efficiency, where HUT is at like 63. It looks like they don't actually have it specified. Wolf was saying that it cost them 23,000 when I last checked a couple months ago. And if it's 23,000 for Wolf, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be and we go down, for efficiency whatever's. I'm pretty sure it's not going to add on 37,000, in terms of a cost per coin. That just doesn't pass the BS whatever.
Yeah,
so,
it's like it rings your BS detector.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I mean that again, to me that number just seems absolutely wrong, and I don't know where their analysis, like how their analysis landed them at 60K as the break even point. But I mean, they did argue that they factor in how HUD 8 took on some debt. So I think like at one point they mentioned that HUD 8 was paying like somewhere in the low teen percentages of interest rates of the debt that they inherited from USBTC, which it isn't ideal. But again, we have to keep in mind that interest rates have gone up in general, and it's not uncommon these days to have like business loans or business debt that are in the low teen percentages of interest rates, as long as it's not something ridiculous like 20 or 30%, which I think the highest one I saw was like 14 point something percent that HUD 8 has, which again, it's not ideal, but it's like I don't see it being absolutely crushing, right? And I think if Bitcoin can turn up towards the halving, which is scheduled for sometime in April, I think that that'll be super easy for HUD 8 to pay that off if they wanted to.
So I think it's very difficult to look at HUT 8 and somehow draw the conclusion that they're a bankruptcy risk. I think that's a big factor for me as well, because how do you look at a company that has 500 million in Bitcoin on its balance sheet and just go, they're gonna go bankrupt when their debts are, if I recall correctly, under 100 million. I think it's like 80 something, 80, 90. Okay, yes, they have, that's a lot of debt for the company, but they have 5 times the amount of debt, like 5 times the amount of the debt in their Bitcoin total. So I just don't understand how the conclusion is that they're at risk of bankruptcy. I feel like there are a lot of other miners that are much more closer to towing that line. And I feel like this is basically just, they went and J Capital looked at USBTC, was like, this is kind of a shit deal, and then decided to run with it. And to me, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't the best deal, but they've already lost so much value at this point. They don't have much further to go.
Yeah, and also somebody looked into the history of J Capital besides the marathon short that they did. Their like most frequent, I guess, bread and butter for shorting are like sketchy Chinese companies, which we all know are sketchy. So like it's not exactly hard to say that a sketchy company is sketchy. So they've been going after like all these low hanging fruits, and as a result, they have a really high rating because it looks like they've been right so many times, and they have been right so many times, but that's only because they go after all the easy targets. That's why they're right? It's like, it's like trying to claim that you're a math genius, but all you do is you do like 3rd grade math tests. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to get 100% on every test, but that doesn't make you a genius, right? So
it's also like the fact that they're targeting smaller cap stocks. I feel like that is part of that, is that they think that they can move the stock downward and therefore make that money really easily. I think that's a big part of it. Okay, because if you tried to do this on Apple, and Apple would just be like, who cares? Everyone who's read the short report probably moves Apple down $1 billion, and then oh my gosh, that was like 1/3%, whereas like HUT 8, they're small enough that they moved it down like $200 million or so in terms of value, because they can, people.
yeah,
I
no,
don't think a lot of shareholders for HUT are sitting there like actually super duper like HUT is the next whatever, so they see something that scares them, they just get out.
Yeah, and especially because like the Bitcoin mining space is very competitive, so it's not like HUT or nothing. Like you could sell HUT and go into another miner really easily. So it's like, to some people, they're like, okay, well, I don't know if this report is true or not. And I've seen a lot of this on Twitter actually, where people are like, I don't care if this short report is true or not. I'm just going to sell it and put my money into another miner just because I have so much choice, not because I believe the short report is real. Right? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of unfortunate because I think long term is going to be a mistake, because if this report does turn out to be a nothing burger, I think you're going to see HUT kind of catch back up to other miners, and then they're going to sell something at the bottom and then buy something that doesn't rebound as much. But that's just my opinion. Don't invest based on what I just said. But
I don't think it's a complete nothing burger. I think it's just like this little like baby burger, and like a very, and like one of those little gummy burgers. I think it's like that.
Yeah,
it's not like you've gone into to McDonald's and stacked 5 Big Macs to find the world's next biggest fraud. It's like, okay, yeah, you got there is a little bit of truth to this, enough that there's a little burger, but it's not sufficient that I think that it's worth losing a lot of sleep over.
It could have been a 4-page report and not a 40-page report. That's my point.
Yeah, like I think the big thing is the USBTC wasn't a great deal, and I mean I think that's true. I think that it wasn't a great deal for Hut 8 particularly, but again, at this point, the ship has sailed, and the new Hut is valued such that it is not unreasonable the amount of stuff they gain from it, even if they overpaid for it.